hold on tight. I'm shaking here with excitement because I have the distinct honor and sincere privilege to bring three legendary pioneers and leaders of Ethereum to the stage. Please help me to welcome Balaji Srinivasan, Joseph Lubin, and Vitalik Buterin. These three distinguished gentlemen will talk about the future of Ethereum and web. We're honored and excited to have you guys here. And please know, check your chat because you've got time. We want to hear you guys talk. Don't want to cut you off. And please don't cut yourself off either. But thanks guys for being here. Can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Hey, James, thank you. Hey, Balaji. Hey, Vitalik.
Well, that's a very kind introduction, but I think that Vitalik and Joe have done a little bit more for Ethereum than I have. I'm just, but I have, I've helped on the margins, but it's obviously all you guys. So thanks for that intro. I guess I'm going to be, the quasi moderator here, but so got a few questions by Joe, Vitalik. Can you guys both hear me? Audio good?
Yes.
Everything?
Yeah, very clear.
Great. Good. So, just starting out with like the history of Ethereum, I remember Vitalik when, most people don't know this, but you and a group that became Blockstream, another group that became Colored Coins, all came into A16Z in 2013 when me and Dixon were general partners there, right? And I remember asking, who's the founder, and everybody raised their hands at the same time. And I was like, all right, that's going to be, there's going to be some fission events here. There's going to be some splitting and rejoining, and which is what happened, some recombination. And then at the Bitcoin conference in, I think, 2014, we all had that conversation out on it was a patio or a lunch thing, and the number of co-founders had now dropped to like 7 or something like that. So it was like a smaller number, but still N. And so I was like, man, these guys are really smart. This is extremely decentralized and theoretical. Is this going to actually work? And I thought you guys were really smart, but that's my recollection of that time. I'd love to hear your take on it.
Yes. So that's the Fellowship of the Ring, where, of course, it turned into 3 groups that ended up going their own way. That was definitely a fascinating and interesting time. That time was like an earlier time for crypto. So it was a very interesting time for crypto that's was, of course, destined to never repeat itself. It was still this time when the space was still small enough that, like, whether you call it crypto or whether you call it Bitcoin as a whole, was still like this one kind of tightly knit community. And 2014 really was the time when like the splits started happening, right? Like 2014 was both the time that Ethereum really properly formed into its own community, that the Bitcoin maximalist movement kind of really emerged, and I guess started talking about how Ethereum, how Ether was going to go to 0. It was also the time when the big block versus small block split happened. It was the time when a lot of other projects, like I think even Tendermint, for example, started around that time. So that was this moment where it really changed from just being kind of one group of people to being a lot of groups of people that were more separately kind of pursuing their different visions. And like there's downsides of that. Like I really appreciated the threads on the Bitcoin forum back when it wasn't even called Bitcoin Talk in 2011, when in politics and society, you just had anarcho-capitalists and socialists just peacefully having long-form debates with each other. And alas, such things are more difficult to find now. But at the same time, you do have these kind of cohesive communities that are actually trying to do the best that they can to executing on each of their various visions. And, like multiple of them actually ended up happening. And I think what the space has accomplished since then has been really meaningful and interesting already.
Joe, what are your recollections of that period?
Yeah, so
early days.
Thinking about it from a sort of philosophical perspective, we see these moments of revelation, received wisdom, bringing the tablets down the mountain, and there's something profound and beautiful there, and then everybody starts to bicker about what the interpretation is and what the proper evolution is. And so we're in that moment of trying to explore the solution space on this received wisdom, which is decentralized protocol technology and blockchain specifically. And it is starting to feel like, certainly the Ethereum community is very collaborative, but it's starting to feel like we're going to rapidly move towards an internet of decentralized protocols, an internet of blockchains, and we'll sort it out. So like at the network hardware level, token ring, Ethernet, that got sorted out. TCP/IP ended up winning in that particular layer. And what I look forward to is seeing a lot of these networks interoperate smoothly with one another, and that's starting to happen via bridges and other technologies, and essentially moving up the stack, creating abstractions so that we just think about tokens, not which flavor of token is sitting on what particular network. And so it'll be great to see this layer rationalize itself. Happy to see a lot of vigorous collaboration, competition, and communication.
Well, it's funny you say that. One paper I wrote internally at Coinbase, and probably should have published externally, but was about like the nouns and the verbs of crypto. So a noun is like a holder, a miner, a staker, a user, a wallet, et cetera. And the verbs, buy, sell, send, receive, were sort of in mine, were like the 5 verbs of like the first several years, right? And now, more recently, over the last 3 or 4 years, we've had a profusion of new verbs like, stake, and of course, burn has become more common, and, lend and borrow and X and Y and Z, right? A variety of these verbs. And one of the things that I'm observing is more clients are doing more sophisticated things beyond just send and receive. They may need to consume multiple chains or multiple tokens for a particular functionality. They're doing more than simply just send receive, which is basically the only on-chain event for an exchange for many years. Now, they're doing all these things. That's maybe not. That's certainly been going on for at least the past couple of years, but I think that's exploding, like the crypto verbs, and it's tracking those verbs beyond just buy, sell, send, receive, where you can really kind of see the ecosystem building out. Towards that end, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, like the nouns and the verbs, or new verbs you're particularly interested in. Just like interest, borrow and lend is a huge one where you can scale that to trillions of dollars, but I'd love your thoughts on that. Either of you.
Yeah, one thought is just that the verbs that are accessible to more people are interesting. So it's what we're doing is a paradigm shift, and it's about similar to how the internet and web technologies democratized so many things around information, publishing, access, etc. We're seeing democratization of 2 layers. One is the new trust foundation layer, where people, rather than centralized institutions, are constructing the mechanisms of trust for the planet, and that enables the construction of the decentralized finance layer. And so some of the verbs are now available to people. People weren't really allowed to use the verb mint or
Right.
perhaps destroy, burn currency. That was illegal, actually. But now we can freely send our money to the zero address or /dev/null if we want to.
Vitalik, any thoughts on that, or maybe thoughts on scaling? One or both?
Well, on scaling, I think again, right now, we've obviously been seeing just a lot of scaling work that's been happening over the last few years, and I think a lot of it even has academic roots that go decades deeper, finally turning into like real live things that you can go and use, right? Like Loopring and ZK Sync deserve a lot of praise for being the forerunners. They've been these ZK rollups successfully running on Ethereum for over a year now, and the next step is scaling that's not just for very specific applications, but that you can just run generic EVM applications on. And that's like we're seeing a lot of candidates for that, right? There's Arbitrum, there's Optimism, there's ZK Sync's EVM implementation, there's Hermes's EVM implementation, there's the stuff that Starkware is doing, and then at the same time, there's the work within the kind of Ethereum core happening on sharding to just massively increase the space of data that these rollups have to use. And so those things are all kind of happening, and I'm expecting a lot of them to just roll out over the course of the next year or so. And that's, I think, interesting because first of all, like there's clearly a kind of dire need for scaling solutions of some kind. And there's definitely also a concern that if the decentralized scaling solutions don't come in time for the demand, then at some point, like there's going to be this race to the bottom, and these more centralized scaling models are going to take over. And like if that gets kind of locked in as an equilibrium, then like that could be a risk for the space, and it will end up kind of recreating systemic intermediaries that we were trying to get rid of. But I'm very optimistic about the fully decentralized things that are being built. And I think the consequences that we're going to see and that are relevant to enterprise users, right, is that in the enterprise space, it's been historically very private chain dominant. And there were a couple of reasons for this. Like one of them is privacy, another is scalability, a third is regulatory compliance. But I think we're seeing all three of those be addressed, right? Like privacy is being addressed by things like Nightfall from EY and a bunch of other frameworks. Aztec is also another one that use zero knowledge proofs to basically get public chain level guarantees together with private chain level privacy. Actually, even better than the level of privacy that consortium chains give you, because in a consortium chain, you still need the consortium to have the data. And then regulatory compliance, like combined with privacy, that can be just implemented in like whatever kind of combination or permutation you want, using the right zero knowledge proof magic. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, viewing keys. Yeah, no, the Zcash team did a lot of like good kind of pioneering thinking on that. And then scalability, like also, the rollups and the sharding are solving that, right? And so like there's this large set of applications that people have been kind of conferencing and theorizing and blabbing about for a long time, but that haven't really seen the daylight because there hasn't been a good platform for them, or the platforms that exist, either they're closed silos or they cost $7.23 a transaction. But with scaling technology, that's going to completely flip on its head, and a lot of those things are going to become viable again. So it's like this year is a great time to start just building things that even haven't really been built at scale before on blockchains.
One question on scaling. So one thing I think we've discussed, but I'm not sure, is basically that one of the things about crypto as a space is things don't work until they suddenly do. It doesn't kind of work, and then like boom, Ethereum is $30 billion, and then it doesn't work and then DeFi summer, just everything kind of snaps together, right? Mm-hmm. And with scaling in particular, an interesting question is, for the internet to actually scale, we actually needed to lay fiber. You couldn't just go from 28K modems to broadband without a lot of, digging overseas, like undersea cables and, all that type of stuff, right? Or the 5G build out, that's like a lot of antennas. But a fair amount of Ethereum scaling is software, and some of these scaling techniques are synergistic. So in your view, to what extent, can these all just kind of roll out lickety split? Some of them already have, like, Polygon is out there and whatnot, right? Some already have. And, they could roll out and then they could be synergistic and stack on top of each other. And so we get like kind of a vertical capacity increase. We've kind of already seen some of that with Polygon, but I'd like your thoughts on what is to come.
Yeah, and I think there's more challenges with adopting layer 2 scaling solutions than there are with adopting Uniswap, because like part of the magic of Uniswap, right, is that the user interface is just incredibly simple. Like you go to the website and you click buy, right? Like that was a huge paradigm shift, when before the mindset was, well, if you have an exchange, it has to have an order book because order books are like quote capital efficient, and you have to like go and have the ability to place market orders and buy orders and have it clutter up the screen. And Uniswap is like, well, no, screw all that. Like X times Y equals K, bro. And that, like, the simplicity of that ended up I think beating out the inefficiencies of that model. And once people caught onto it, it grew quickly with a scaling solution. Mm-hmm.
You can come with a rational argument for that, which is that your actual cost is the cost of capital plus the cost of time, and that sum of costs is actually minimized with the brokerage for many people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And with things like with scaling solutions, the difference is that there's challenges around first of all, even just in your wallet, you have to do some more slightly more complex work and twiddling around with configurations to actually switch to another network. It's not like one click to switch between one network and another. There's challenges around moving assets between the main chain and a rollup. So for example, withdrawing from an optimistic rollup takes a week. And you can fix this with these second layer markets for withdrawals in progress, but that stuff has to actually be built. There's techniques for moving between rollups more quickly, but that has to actually be built. So there's challenges around key management. There's challenges around security. So there's this larger set of challenges, and so it's less 0 to 1 and more layer 2 is first to get powerful enough for this set of applications, and then but they still have these weaknesses, and then the weaknesses reduce, and the weaknesses reduce more. And we are in the early stages of this already, right? ZK Sync, for example, it gets used by Gitcoin grants, but it's only getting used for a few things, right? If the Ethereum community had a more active consumer merchant payments ecosystem, which I think it should, then I think it would have, coordinated more usage of Loopring and ZK Sync by now. But
what percentage? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but I'm just that's less of a focus of the community right now. But at some point, it's layer 2s are going to support enough of what people wants to do that people will take them seriously, and the network effects will go from there. But I mean, I do think that that there is going to be some friction in the transition, which I think is okay. I think it's actually good because this is fairly security demanding technology, and it's important to kind of take it slow and try it out before we trust billions of dollars to it.
One question for you, I mean, maybe this post exists, but if it doesn't, might be a good one to make, is something where you sort of rank order, you take various scaling solutions and you're like, okay, this one is passive and requires 0 effort by the developer. This requires 1 line of code, and this requires significant surgery on the whole thing. And you need to think about state on multiple chains and so on. So put that on the x-axis, and then put scaling benefit or something on the y-axis, right? Right. And there's different ways of quantifying that.
There's a post that's not. There's my post on rollups, right, which doesn't really take the DevX angle, but it does take the angle of what are the security properties and what are the capabilities. So can it even support general purpose EVM applications versus is it just something for payments and a couple of other things? I think the differences in terms of DevX,
Guido with Python. With Python 3, for example, his change from print without the parens to print with the parens actually broke enormous amounts of code. It's the dumbest change you could imagine, but it was actually
including my code.
Including my code, including all of our code, right? So that's why the 0 dev effort, right, or the 1-line import at the top is potentially something to optimize for. And I guess I just don't have a good.
It's valuable, though. I think at the same time, there's also a strong case for being willing to put your foot down and do the short-term pain for long-term gain things, especially since we're an exponential ecosystem, and the long term will have thousands of times more users than we do now.
To your point, Apology, it may feel like scaling is going to go slowly or is going slowly, but it is happening in parallel. So many different efforts are happening inside of the Ethereum ecosystem at layer 2 with Ethereum 2. And so it is likely to bloom pretty rapidly at some critical point. And it's also important to note that sufficient decentralization is acceptable for certain kinds of systems. We will be operating on an internet of blockchains, and there'll be subnets that are less massively decentralized, although I do believe massive decentralization will win in the end for the important use cases, the high value use cases. It's great that this may be controversial, that the Binance Smart Chains and others are helping the early majority to onboard themselves inexpensively. I think of them as the AOLs and the CompuServes of our era, and I think of them as either self-limiting processes or something that will end up being niche as scalability comes to fully decentralized solutions. It's also important to note that we're just figuring out the different kinds of blockchain solutions that are appropriate for different kinds of use cases. So there may be some architectures that are great for high frequency trading. And I think we'll see many of the current technological approaches figure out their niche and do well in that niche. And that's another sort of macro form of scaling.
Yeah, and like Jeff Dean has a famous post that you guys may be familiar with, where he kind of goes through like the number of nanoseconds, or for different kinds of operations, and like L2 cache is the fastest, then you have RAM, and then you have hard disk, and then the really slow is send a packet to the Netherlands and back, and just like understanding those orders of magnitude for within a computer system. And so as I've just messed around with different things and like invest in lots of projects and just kind of advising people and building our own systems, lots of them at Coinbase, I think of there being like 3 tiers: on disk, online, on chain. And just like with the early internet, a big part of the art was minimizing like actual bandwidth traffic, right? So like Netflix would just let you order the DVD by mail. It wouldn't actually stream it to you, right? Or Amazon would just let you click on a website. And that's why they did books, because it wasn't like a high bandwidth thing to sell online. It's like, just, and it was relatively easy to sell. So Google also is just a search query, put in some keywords, bring it back. It wasn't a high bandwidth thing initially, right? In the same way, today, a lot of applications are engineered around block size scarcity being an important constraint, and will be for a while. Even today, 20 years into the internet, like, obviously more than 20, it's like 50 or whatever, depending on your count. Let's say 25 years into the consumer internet, starting in 1995, arguably with Netscape. It is possible to download a meg of JavaScript, and some mobile apps are engineered like that, but it's also possible to build apps that are kind of efficient. And so I think that these that trade-off surface migrates with time, but I don't think the fundamentals of the trade-off go away between scaling is always valuable, and you kind of split things between different levels. So that's one thought there. I wanted to make sure we kind of hit some of these other things. Let me ask a question that's off book, okay? And, maybe I think might be interesting. So something I have been thinking a lot more about recently, especially with lots of things that we've all been talking about for a while, like remote and international founders and India booting up, all that stuff is now like happening in an unignorable way thanks to COVID, like the whole, right? And something I've actually been thinking about is that international property kind of didn't really exist before crypto. And what I mean by that is, if you want to do like a Brazil, Bangladesh deal, okay, if you try to get the lawyers to do something like that, Joseph, you spent a lot of time on Wall Street. What would basically happen is they would, at best, try to find like some US corporation intermediary, which did have, if the Brazilian company wanted to acquire the Bangladesh company, like a US kind of adapter for the two, because the US had done deals in both countries, or nowadays also a Chinese adapter, because the Chinese have done deals around the world. So you essentially centralize in both of these two systems, like international property rights, like cross-border anything kind of involves either the US or China as an intermediary until crypto, right? And the reason being because these two giant scaled ecosystems had tendrils all over the world, right? There's a Chinese, set of businesses in Bangladesh and in Brazil. There's American businesses in Bangladesh and Brazil, but probably not too many between the two until crypto, right? And so this is something I've thought about a lot, that the actual unlock of this is, before you had like N sub 1 and N sub 2 and N sub 3 squared, that's say 300 million Americans trading with each other, and a few 100 million Brazilians and 100 million Bangladeshis, and there's certainly some cross-border, especially for the Americans around the world. But now you have kind of the end-to-end matrix of everybody trading with each other. I know you're on Wall Street for a long time, Joe. I'd love your thoughts on that. Like the complexity of international deals means they just don't happen except for very large trades, or shoot that down. Tell me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons why what our ecosystem is doing is so profound. We don't have a global financial system. We have a set of siloed financial systems across the globe that operate via correspondent relationships and are monitored at the borders at gateways by governments which impose rules on the system. It is just profound that we're in the process of setting up a fluid, global, borderless trust foundation for the planet, and a fluid, global, borderless financial infrastructure, decentralized financial infrastructure. And as things get increasingly crazy, which I think is going to happen for a little while, and adversarial, it's going to be really important to have this non-national infrastructure where nation states and other kinds of actors can put agreements together, can stake value in those agreements, and can be held accountable either by peers or by protocols to do what the agreements require them to do. And so I'm extremely excited about this infrastructure being the foundation of like true coherent globalization. It's going to take a long time, but it's something humanity needs.
Okay, I'll ask one more question and then maybe we'll go to the Q&A. So something I have been thinking about, Vitalik, do you think that you could have done Ethereum as an American? Like, because as a Canadian, you did the Swiss Foundation and so on, but could you have done it as an American?
Again, it would definitely have been harder. Like it's actually, like there's more headaches in setting up or participating in listings if you're a U.S. citizen. Like they're basically, a lot of these banks are actually like basically forced to discriminate against U.S. citizens in various ways because of just like internet and extraterritorial legal issues. But this also reminds me of do you remember the story that I was actually when I started my whole Bitcoin trip, my original plan had been to do my university co-op term with Ripple, right? And
oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, I did. I called up Jed McCaleb, and he basically said yes in 5 minutes. And then we started going through the U.S. visa bureaucracy. And it turns out that the usual channel for getting my J1 visa did not work because it required the company to have existed for 1 year, and it only existed for 9 months. And so we tried fumbling around through the system for a couple of months, and eventually we gave up. And so, the moral of the story basically is that if the visa stuff had been simpler, then I would have been working for Ripple now instead of doing it. And
XRP the standard.
Exactly. Brian Kaplan is wrong. Immigration restrictions can do some good after all.
Oh, okay, that's hilarious.
My guess is Ripple would have been working for you at this point.
Right.
Rather than on its own tangent.
Very funny. All right. I guess the EEA says we're moving to the member-only Q&A. I think that's, is that right?
Yeah,
James?
I think I'm going to do a little wrap up here, but I feel bad interrupting you guys because I could just sit here and listen to you speak all afternoon, and I'm sure our attendees as well. So let me, so again, thanks Balaji, Joseph, and Vitalik. Greatly appreciate you being here.